Hello, everyone. Welcome. I will introduce Nakanya Macney, who's going to be the session moderator today. She will be monitoring the chat and she will be taking notes about your questions. And then at the end of the presentation, you will be allowed to unmute yourself so you can ask questions to the presenters. And Nakanya, could you please introduce the presenters and the session today?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to the Power of Teacher Knowledge and Needs-Based Small Groups, presented to you by the DC Reading Clinic. Today, you will have Mary Clayman, who's the founder and director, Jacqueline Roach, who's a coach, Abigail Klein, manager and coach. And then we are excited to have our teacher panelists to include Ann Galligan, Erica Hardy, and Lakeisha Scarlett. So please just be mindful that you can type your comments in the chat. I will be monitoring those for any questions, any comments during the presentation. And then at the end of the presentation, there will be an opportunity for Q&A. So if you have something in the chat, I will go ahead and read those out loud for the presenters to be able to answer as well. Enjoy the presentation and thank you again.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. If everyone could give me a thumbs up that they can hear me and see my screen, we'll get going right away. Thank you, Ms. Hardy. My name is Mary Clayman. I'm the director of the DC Reading Clinic, and we are thrilled you've joined us here today to talk about two things. These are the two things to keep in mind: the power of teacher knowledge and needs-based small groups. What we're going to do today is highlight those two things through about a 15-minute presentation before we turn it over to our teacher panel. You'll hear a little bit about the DC Reading Clinic's mission and program, and of course, you'll meet those teachers and be able to engage with them with some question and answer. So at the DC Reading Clinic, I'm going to mention those two things again. We believe in the power of teacher knowledge and needs-based small groups to drive student success. And we really focus on students' needs, and we coach teachers on working with students in their reading needs to accelerate student success. You probably might be wondering what I mean by teacher knowledge. Well, the DC Reading Clinic is actually a graduate level practicum in which we teach teachers all about the science of reading, which is a nebulous and often misunderstood term. So what does that mean? It means we teach them about the theory behind reading, developmental theory, the simple view of reading, so on and so forth. We teach them about the research, the long-term studies that have been done for decades in the United States and other countries about what makes good reading instruction. We teach them about cognition, about the fMRI studies that clue us into how students acquire print. And we teach them all about the English language, the phonology and the orthography of the English language. Of course, there's more, but I'll move on. At the same time, teachers are applying that research in practice in their practicum. So the DC Reading Clinic isn't only the grad class, it's a clinical practicum as well. And we are coaching teachers weekly to transfer that research to practice in a needs-based small group. So the teachers you'll meet today implement needs-based small groups in their classrooms and have help applying that research to practice. We've known for years that teacher knowledge matters. Multiple studies have demonstrated that the more teachers know about reading, the better their students do. Take this study by Piasta, for example, which found that using the same exact decoding instruction, more knowledgeable teachers who knew about cognition and the English language, had greater results for their students. So, how do we teach and measure teacher knowledge? Well, what we do is we align to the Center for Effective Reading Instruction and the Knowledge and Practice Standards for Teachers of Reading. Then we give a pre-test at the beginning of the clinic before our teachers have taken the grad course, and we give a post-test. And of course, we want to see at least 25 percentage points of growth from pre-test to post-test. It covers all of the knowledge and practice standards for teachers of reading, so it's important that teachers are growing in their skills. We've trained over 200 teachers so far, and every semester we have met that goal of at least 25 percentage growth on the pre-test to post-test. For example, you can see how this teacher knowledge would really improve practice. Here's some data from one of our year-long cohorts last year. On the pretest, you can see that teachers average around 45 to 50% on some pretty pivotal concepts of early reading instruction. I'll give you a moment to review their post-test averages. So teachers averaged about 90% on really key instructional levers for students by the end of our program. And it's not just that knowledge matters, it matters that teachers feel like they grew in their craft. We know that it's important that they feel that the knowledge positively impacts their students. So according to one year-long survey, and we do these surveys with all of our cohorts, 100% of teachers agreed or strongly agreed that the program actually positively impacted their students' literacy development. And you'll see that here today with some data we'll share. Here's a qualitative comment from one of our spring 2019 teachers. Go ahead and read it, and I'll share another one with you in a moment. Another teacher from another cohort shared, "Everything we learned in the clinic was extremely helpful, and it informed instruction right away. We not only learned strategies we could use with our struggling readers, but we learned why they were struggling. We learned to be diagnostic and help meet our students' needs. At the clinic, we actually have two models for how we reach teachers. So first, and our original program is the citywide clinical practicum, which began in 2018. In 2020, we established our in-schools models, and we have teachers from both models represented here today. Just quickly, our citywide model, you might have heard of these clinics, which are the kind of original form of the DC Reading Clinic. In two locations, Ward 5 and Ward 8, teachers can come and get one-on-one training after school while they take their grad course. So this option is for teachers who have the ability to come after school about 2 to 3 days a week to get their training. But we also have our in-schools model. And so I want to introduce you to Abigail Klein and Jacqueline Roche, our two amazing in-schools coaches. Jackie, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Mary. My name is Jackie. I actually started in the citywide program as the coordinator at our Emery location and have since become a coach for our in-schools program, supporting 5 schools across Southeast and Northeast.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Abby. I work with Jackie as a coach for our in-schools program. I also coach 5 schools, so you can see where Jackie and I together are represented in wards 7 and 8 on our map. Jackie and I train several educators each school year about the same science of reading and structured literacy content as the citywide model. Our partnership with our schools exists throughout the entire school year. Now, Mary just shared with you a bit about teacher knowledge. So now we want to focus on the needs-based small groups, which takes place during the literacy block in the classrooms.
So the Institute of Education Sciences 2018 practice guide describes several recommendations drawn from decades of research. The recommendation with the strongest evidence says we must provide intensive, systematic instruction on up to 3 foundational reading skills in small groups to students who score below benchmark on universal screening. All of these recommendations, which are available on the IES website and in our session materials, heavily inspired the creation of our in-schools program. So first, in our in-schools program, we help our participants analyze student scores from the universal screener, DIBELS, which DCPS mandates is given to all students, kindergarten through 2nd grade, 3 times per year. Then we coach our participants on planning and implementing needs-based structured literacy small group instruction informed by that data analysis. So what does this look like in the schools we partner with? DCRC coaches support teacher planning and implementation of needs-based small group instruction during their literacy block. This occurs over 3 intervention cycles. On the slide, you'll see the intervention cycle. Each one of these cycles follows the same process of gathering and analyzing data, groups at least 3 times per week, and collecting post-assessment data to gauge student response to instruction. We'll be sharing our lesson plan template, so let's focus on what the instruction of needs-based small groups looks like. Based on evidence regarding the efficacy of structured literacy techniques, our lesson plan targets phonemic awareness and phonics skill development to strengthen students' word recognition skills. Today, you're receiving the template that inspired our plan, which is from Letter Lessons and First Words, written by Heidi Ann Mesmer. On the screen, you'll see the part of the lesson plan template that's in your handouts. Just like the plan on the slide, our lesson section, a Hear It section in which we focus on phonemic awareness skills, concept, and involve the students in word reading practice, a Spell It portion, and finally, we have seen some remarkable results with our students.
Thanks, Jackie. There's some data for our students who participated in a needs-based structured literacy small group intervention cycle. And the data we're going to show you, it comes from the nationally normed screener called DIBBLES. I'm sure many of you on this call are familiar. And DCPS students in grades K through 2 take this 3 times a year to measure those indicators for early literacy skills like letter name and sound knowledge, phonemic segmentation, and decoding. So now on the screen, you see for this group of kiddos at beginning of the year, mostly well below and below scores across all domains. Now at middle of the year, you see these same students are mostly at benchmark across all domains. So the students in this intervention group, they came in beginning of the year, not knowing many letter names or sounds. Now at middle of the year, not only have they reached benchmark for letter names and made gains with sounds, they are impressively in kindergarten reading 3-letter words. So this data shows how teacher knowledge has positively impacted this group of students who are receiving the needs-based small group intervention. We also want to show you how teacher knowledge is transforming instruction for entire classes of students. So now we have data from, like I said, a whole class of students where the teacher learned the research behind how students develop early decoding skills when they come to school with little to no segmenting and blending skills and limited letter name and sound knowledge. So this teacher took the research and implemented that systematic practice in phonemic proficiency skills and letter sound correspondences through needs-based small groups. Now on the slide, you see at the beginning of the year, 11% of students were on benchmark. After meeting with the needs-based small group with their teacher, now in the middle of the year, we have 77% of students at or above benchmark. Now, it's also important to point out that even students who stayed in that well below benchmark or below benchmark range, which is shown in red and yellow, those students are still making gains within specific subscores. So using this class data, for example, in January, we had 1 student in the below benchmark range for the overall composite score. However, when we look deeper at the subscores, that same student we see has actually exceeded the middle of the year goal in the nonsense word fluency, words read correctly score. So that child has actually grown in every subscore since beginning of the year. So while the composite data may reveal that a student is still below benchmark, we help our teachers to be constantly diagnosing specific needs from that subscore analysis to target the skills within their needs-based small groups. We know that these students may need more intensive instruction in those areas, and so we continue to work with them through the end of the school year. Finally, we wanted to show you just another fantastic example of growth from a teacher who implemented needs-based small groups, again, with her entire class. At the beginning of the year, 9% of students were on or above benchmark. We see now at middle of the year, 58% of students were now on or above benchmark. So as you can see, with the increased knowledge and phonemic awareness and the phonology of English, with phonics and that orthography of English, the teachers can strategically and explicitly teach the concepts to the entire class. So we're really excited to see growth even as we progress towards the end of the year.
Thank you so much, Jackie and Abby. And don't worry, we're going to stop talking in a second because I'd like to introduce the fabulous teachers who actually make it happen. Abby, Jackie, and I, and the rest of the staff at the clinic, we have coaching roles, but we know that teachers are actually where all the magic happens. So we're going to introduce you to 3 awesome teachers today who've been trained or are currently being trained by the clinic, and they've done both either the citywide program or the in-schools program. And they're going to be talking about the power of teacher knowledge and needs-based small groups. Just quickly, I'll introduce, we have Miss Scarlett and Miss Galligan, who are kindergarten teachers, and Miss Hardy, who is a first grade teacher. And to get to know our teachers a bit more, I see them putting their videos on, which is awesome. We have a few questions just to get us warmed up today. So I'd love for every teacher, Lakeisha, I might pick on you first to share, just because you're first on the screen here, to tell us a little bit about your early literacy journey and what brought you to the clinic or wanting to learn about science of reading and structured literacy. So we'll go Lakeisha, then Annie, then Erica, and then we'll kind of open up for more questions. Lakeisha.
Hi, good afternoon. So what brought me to the clinic was my frustration in being told to teach reading with the use of so many different strategies and interventions. I remember having so much information and not knowing exactly where to start and having a feeling in my head about to explode. It seemed like a new PD strategy and intervention was added every year to my mountain of strategies and interventions already. I was practically reinventing the wheel every year to successfully roll out guided reading lesson plans. I was frustrated because I was told to teach this and to teach that, but I never knew the why behind it all, behind the strategies, the interventions, and the PDs. It was as if I was being taught everything in isolation without knowing proper steps in getting to the overall goal and helping my students to become great readers rather than decoders. I realized that when we know the what we are teaching and why we are teaching it, it helps us in the how to help students meet end goals. Students will be even better readers and writers because the teacher, him or herself, actually know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the proper steps to implement, and how to roll out the needs-based small group instruction lessons and explicitly teach those lessons. So I had to go back. I wrote it down. I didn't want to forget anything that reminded me why I actually wanted to enroll into the DC Reader Clinic.
Thank you so much. Annie, could you share a little bit, Ms. Galligan?
Sure. So I had a similar experience just trying to piecemeal what I had learned together, and it just didn't seem cohesive. It didn't seem to fit. I was a first-year teacher observing other teachers and trying to learn more because I didn't feel prepared by my college courses to really teach foundational reading skills in kindergarten. And the things that I was learning were contradicting themselves. So I was already overwhelmed as a first-year teacher, becoming more overwhelmed, and similarly to Ms. Scarlett, frustrated. And so, I made do for the first, 4 years of teaching, and I saw some progress, but it was inconsistent growth with my students. I wasn't consistently getting my students where I needed them to be. So I started learning a little bit about the science of reading last year. And so then when I learned about the reading clinic opportunity and what their focus was and how they did it, I was immediately really intrigued and excited to engage in it. And I'm so happy that I did, because there is a lot more that makes sense now and a lot less frustration and feeling of being overwhelmed.
And Ms. Hardy, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ms. Hardy. So I've been teaching in general for about 14 years. And specifically, I've been teaching literacy for the past 10 years. I know that I've always had a love for teaching reading. So after 10 years, I feel like I've learned a lot, but I really wanted to be able to better my craft. So I also felt like there was a lot of loss of learning during the pandemic. So I really wanted to better my teaching when it came to specifically phonemic awareness instruction and also decoding instruction. So I was able to learn a little bit about the DC Reading Clinic. And once I heard about them and some of the great work that they're doing, I decided to apply right away.
Great. Thank you all for sharing. We're going to ask one more question from the clinic staff and have you all share. And then to our audience members, thank you for sticking with us. You can start putting questions in the chat and then we'll have our teacher panel discuss your questions as well. So please start putting questions in the chat now. Hopefully we'll be able to have some people come on and share their questions as well. But again, we're going to share one more question from the clinic staff that we're excited to hear your answers to. So to our beautiful teacher panel, what is the one most impactful thing you've learned and how has it affected your instruction? The floor is open for our teachers.
I can start. So this one is a hard question because I feel like we've learned so many things. But what I think had the greatest impact for me was learning about the phonology of the English language. So we learned that to become really good at teaching reading and writing, we have to know more about how language works. So we have this technique where we're able to study more about language. And as we study language and how our students use it, we then can clearly teach like sounds and words and sentences.
I would say the most impactful thing for me is kind of two parts. It's both the importance of phonemic awareness skills in laying that foundation for future reading. So knowing how important that was, I was able to take an immense amount of time to really hone in on those skills instead of rushing forward, just trying to get my kids in books and get my kids reading. So learning about the importance of that, and then also being taught specifically how to teach that in small groups before getting into phonics and then alongside phonics was super impactful on both my confidence in my teaching of small groups and my students' growth, because I've never seen my students grow as fast and as consistently as they have this year.
I would say the most impactful would be learning to reach all students. And with joining the DC Reading Clinic, I can honestly say I would spend a lot of my time, energy, and planning with my students who were emerging readers, as opposed to those who were on grade level or above grade level, because I felt as though they needed more work and support. So one tool in which really important, as a matter of fact, right before I logged on, I actually implemented one of the lessons was the scope and sequence for the letter introduction, where you first start off with teaching letters, and then it goes into teaching digraphs, and then a double spelling rule and multi-syllabic words. So no matter where the students are, you can actually use those lessons to explicitly teach them so that it can further their reading progressions. So I felt really good. I actually had the confusion with CH and SH. And one thing, another thing, in addition to the letter introduction, scope and sequence, there are also many lessons. So even as you're reading along, for those students, for those teachers who are visual learners like myself, it's really good to see those videos and take your own notes and implement them right away. So I would have to say that that was really, really great for me, because I knew that by looking at the data from MClass, Lexia, just from a classroom observation, I was able to take that information, see where my students are currently performing, look on that letter, scope, and sequence, and then explicitly teach those lessons that are outlined. And that has made a world of a difference. And it has saved me some family time because everything's already there. So I would have to say that.
Wonderful. We have just a few questions. I'm going to try and go in order as much as possible. So Ms. Corney, I don't know. Oh, I can see you. Is there any way you could take yourself off mute and share your question you have here in the chat and maybe explain the metacognition part a little bit more?
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
So what was your aha moment of when you think about all of the learning that you had to do in the classes, and then of course you're practicing? What was your aha moment for you where you can explain the metacognition of like, oh, now that makes sense, or oh, my baby got it, or what was that moment for you that made you then like dig in a little deeper and trust the process?
I would say just learning about the simple view of reading, in which you're teaching the students the coding skills, and then teaching them the language comprehension in order for them to have overall reading comprehension. So to hear about it, to see a visual and learn about it in the DC Reading Clinic, and then actually see that process come alive within the classroom, I'm like, that was my aha moment. So even when I had the students in the classroom who they knew their letters, they knew their letter sounds, now we were at the point in which we're tapping and blending. So then I'm like, oh, now I know the difference between readers and decoders, because my students, they were decoding and we're reading along. Then I'll stop and ask the question, like, so what was the story about? And they're looking at me like, I don't know, because they spent much of their time decoding. So I knew that now I have to work on language comprehension and dive into that vocabulary. And now that they have the decoding piece and the vocabulary, it actually strengthened their overall reading comprehension, which made them readers rather than decoders. So just learning about these practices, and then being able to implement in your classroom and see it come alive, that was my aha moment. And also, extra little plug, with the DC Reading Clinic, this has to be the very first professional learning experience in which I could take the information and implement it right away. And that's what I always wanted to do, implement things right away. And I was able to do so. As a matter of fact, I tested on my husband, my children, and everybody else. Once I learned something, that was my aha moment. I wanted to make sure someone else learned it as well.
I can also speak to this question. So my aha moment came in this idea of like creating small groups, because I felt like, okay, I know how to do guided reading groups. I got it down. But being in the clinic, I learned that we need to create needs-based groups with our instruction geared around evidence-based reading interventions. So in order to really be highly effective for our early readers, we should be teaching like explicit phonics along with phonological awareness activities, but also decodable books. And I saw in the chat, somebody mentioned decodable text, and decodable texts have been so key for my early readers. So if I leave one thing with you guys, it's definitely decodable texts are key.
My aha moment was when my students started to check their own spelling and notice that sounds were either missing or sounds were incorrect. And then they were able to use their phonemic awareness skills to substitute and change their sounds at any part in the word to fix their own spelling. And so, whereas originally I was kind of like, oh, check that specific letter, that one might not be right, I could point to the word and say, double check. They could say the sounds, and I could say, wait, I wrote grab, it's supposed to be crab, and immediately change it to a C. And them doing that on their own without me is like awesome, really inspiring. So yeah.
Ms. Galligan's speaking there to a very specific both technique and to the knowledge we arm teachers with around phoneme segmentation and orthographic mapping. So that's wonderful to see it come so alive. There are a few questions in the chat that I think only the staff can answer. I don't want the teachers to have to answer that. DCPS sponsors the DC Reading Clinic. We're part of DCPS. So it is a program for DCPS teachers. There've been a few questions there. But there's another question about the use of decodable texts and during guided reading. We should clarify that this is needs-based small groups. So we're really working with students on their needs during a 20-minute lesson plan. So if the teachers could actually just answer about your use of text or decodable text, and who do you use what sort of text for? I think that's a general question that's coming up in the chat.
Well, I would say I actually use decodable text for my immersion readers, my readers that are on grade level and above grade level. Is beneficial for all, especially when you're explicitly teaching certain skills. For example, if I'm working on diagraphs, working on vowel teams, working on bossy E, no matter where they are in their reading progressions, they can still utilize those decodable texts and see a certain word that they can learn to decode on their own. And I'll say within my classroom, before we start to read, I ask the students to either take out their binoculars, magnifying glass, or their glasses, whatever they're going to use to be a detective to decode a word as opposed to guessing the word. So even when we show a word and they're trying to figure it out, they'll first say, oh, Miss Scarlett, I see a diagram. I see a bossy E. I see a vowel team. So just with them knowing those skills, and which I explicitly taught in isolation, it still helps them out with actually reading those words in a decodable text. And then I love the decodable text as well, because there are a lot of sight words. You know, you have your trick word that you would teach and say decodable.
Yes, I think Ms. Scarlett definitely nailed it. So I use decodable text during the reading portion of my lesson. So basically whatever particular spelling pattern that we might be working on. For example, this week we worked on SH digraph. So they had a decodable text that had words with SH to just give them that extra practice to be able to take what they focused on when we practice learning the sound, to being able to read words with that sound, to be able to spell words with that sound, and then moving into actual text to be able to utilize that skill. So yes.
Yeah, they've answered the question quite well. I have this exact same experience in my classroom.
Wonderful. There's a question coming up in the chat that has a similar vibe in some of the questions. And this one specifically, the text I'm taking from is from Emily Morris. What would you say are the most important supports, systems, or infrastructure needed at a school or a district to make what you do possible? So teachers, what supports or systems or infrastructure is helpful to your work?
Something that's been crucial for me is having a specific time for intervention every day. I have a 30-minute intervention block in the afternoon every day, and that is on top of my reading group time that is in the morning with my reading centers and that time as well. So I really have the time to just sit down and focus on intervention with my students rather than trying to squeeze it in, rather than trying to balance multiple different things. I can get with my students for their needs-based groups every day.
I would say the trust and support from administration, in which I believe I've received a lot of. For example, my instructional coach, she actually took part in DC Reading Clinic over the summer as well. So with that collaboration, just the trust that you're going to take the information and run with it. We shared lesson plans with one another and we're able to execute and then even come in and give feedback, because there may be some things that I didn't see during my facilitation and what she's able to bring to my attention. And then I can go back and reteach a certain lesson. And I'll have to say too, Mary Clayman of DC Reading Clinic helped out a lot too, because after the clinic, which you guys may not know, she'll actually come into your classroom to make sure that you're implementing what you were taught correctly as well. So getting that feedback from DC Reading Clinic and from the instructional coach will make a world of a difference in your overall instruction.
There's a really compelling question here about what are some skills you notice? I know we have a first grade teacher here, so Ms. Hardy, you can chime in if you want, but what are skills you notice coming into your grade level, especially K, that kids are missing that you wish pre-K teachers strengthened even more than we know they already do, because they're already working super hard. But what are some of those skills coming into kinder and coming into first that you wish were more strong?
I know a big one is rhyming. Students come in having a lot of difficulty being able to rhyme words. So I think that if they were able to have a little bit of work with that in early childhood, I think it would be a great segue into first grade and kindergarten.
I agree. I think just anything having to do with phonemic awareness and the sounds in words, any additional foundation that can be laid before they get into kindergarten is awesome. So segmenting sounds, blending sounds, initial sound in a word, those kinds of things would be really helpful. And then I would say letter identification. Those are some things that just really lay that foundation and make it even easier for us to build on.
And I will have to agree. I was going to say the same thing, the phoneme blending, phoneme segmentation, just pretty much Haggerty and foundations would be a great push, like the introduction. Students, they love once, knowing something and then going to that next level and being reintroduced like, hey, I know that. Just like with the movement breaks, when they're telling Ms. Scarlett to request certain movement breaks that they've already experienced in pre-K. But I think definitely with that phoneme segmentation and phoneme blending and rhyming, I didn't realize rhyming was so difficult in kindergarten, but they'll eventually get it. But definitely great skills to start off in pre-K.
Great. I think we have time for about 2 more questions. So I've been monitoring the chat. Please pop any other questions in. One question that's come up is, what's like one small thing you think reading teachers in K and 1 could implement tomorrow? I know everyone's eager to implement something tomorrow. So what would it be if you were giving advice to someone else to implement tomorrow? It can be broad or specific to accelerate student reading achievement.
I would say phoneme segmentation and phoneme blending. Those are, if you don't have Haggerty at your school, they have several YouTube videos in which you can practice. And I know even on online, you can just Google words like phoneme segmentation. They'll even give you a list of words. But just to practice those strategies, I noticed that when I work on explicitly teach phoneme segmentation and phoneme blending, then when we're actually reading a word, what's happening out and blending, students are so much more like successful in doing that. Initially, before explicitly teaching phoneme blending and segmentation, I would have a lot of students, like for instance, if it was a nonsense word, W-U-Z, they would say what, and then when they have to blend it, they will only say the medial and final sound, or they would say the beginning and the medial sound and then omit the final sound. But I just think with all that phoneme blending and the chopping, it just helps them out so much.
I would bounce off that by saying, absolutely, the segmenting and the blending, and specifically with sounds of what you're going to introduce next in phonics. So for example, I've been for the past few weeks working on blends, R blends and L blends with just with phonemic awareness, no text, no visual text, not phonics yet. And then this week I introduced L blends to one of my groups, and that's the fastest they've picked up a new phonics skill. They're reading words with L blends as if they've known it all along, because their phonemic awareness, they were so used to hearing those blends that as soon as they saw them, they knew exactly what to expect. And so laying that, again, that foundation really hard with blending and segmenting with those sounds has made them like speed through it. And now we're already ready for the next activity and the next phonics.
For me, I think definitely teaching the articulations of sounds. So I know we're so eager to like show them the letter, but we have to really kind of take a step back and just really work on the sounds first before we introduce them to actually being able to see the actual letter or the spelling pattern or whatever it might be. So definitely articulation of sounds.
Wonderful. Thank you all. There's one more question for teachers, and then there are a few questions that the coaches will have to address. And I don't want to answer this for teachers, but the question is generally around like is the coaching during the day, after school? How do you get support for doing that? And so we have two different models. The clinical model, which Ms. Scarlett did, it's a lot of work. It's 60 to 80 hours of work on top of your regular job over the course of a semester. Ms. Scarlett chose to do it in the summer. I have that right, Ms. Scarlett? So she chose to do it during the summer. So that's one model. And then Ms. Galligan and Ms. Hardy, I'd love you to talk a little bit about like how much extra work it is. And please be as honest as possible. Do you have time during the day to get some of the extra work done? The idea is to embed it during their school day, the coaching, but there is a grad class at night. So Ms. Galligan, Ms. Hardy, if you could talk about kind of when you get it all done, and Ms. Scarlett, of course, if you want to jump in too.
Okay, so I feel like I have plenty of time to plan because I have planning time during the day. So during that time, I'm able to plan for my needs-based groups. And then of course we have class on Tuesdays. And then I'm able to meet with my coach on Thursdays. And then I'm kind of going backwards. And then Monday, Abigail comes in to observe my needs-based group. So I feel like I do have enough time. And I think that the work that we're doing is so intentional. So I don't feel overwhelmed or anything like that. And Abby's really awesome. So she's been amazing. She's definitely been an amazing coach. So I don't feel too, just me personally, I don't feel too overwhelmed.
Yeah, I agree. Especially now that we're further in the year and the lesson plan is always the same structure. I've really internalized that, and actually planning the lessons doesn't take long once I know what I want to teach. So I'm able to get that done during my planning periods. And I am observed during school by Jackie. And then I've done both. So I previously had coaching meetings with her after school one day, and now we do it during school, during one of my planning periods as well. So I've now been able to, aside from class, get all of my work done for this clinic during my work hours. And then, having the class on Tuesdays, now it's every other week. It's even more manageable. In the beginning of the year, having it be every week is super helpful as I was trying to figure out what on earth I was doing. And then now it's great to have a little bit extra free time and have it just every other week.
Yeah, I'd like to mention there, the idea is not to replace anything. It's to do what we're already doing, small groups, really intentionally and better. So thanks, Ms. Galligan and Ms. Hardy, for jumping in there. The last question we're going to address, I am sure all of our highly trained teachers could address themselves, but I'm going to take them off the hook there and allow one of our coaches to address this question. So Dustin Tamsin asks a fantastic question. If you've been following Science of Reading debate the last few weeks and months, there's been a lot of discourse on having phonemic awareness with the introduction of a letter or even an articulation card like Ms. Hardy and Ms. Galligan were talking about. So basically a visual anchor for the phoneme. So say, for example, having the letter T present when working on the articulation of T in the word tad. That's a very simple example. And so I'm going to actually kick this to one of my coaches, Abigail Klein. So Dustin in the chat is wondering, how are we approaching that? Because typically phonemic awareness instruction has been done without the introduction of graphemes or articulation cards. And we've done a lot of research at the clinic here on this. So Abby, do you want to talk a little bit about how we approach that at the clinic?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And if I forget something to my colleagues, please jump in. Dustin, this question, man, we have spent a lot of time trying to stay up on all the research articles, all the journal articles from colleagues, all of that. Very much thinking about this question as well. So I would say we are prioritizing segmenting and blending phonemic awareness work to get the biggest bang for the buck to transfer and translate to students' decoding gains. So we're still doing a lot of segmenting and blending as a traditional phonemic awareness skill building, and making sure, as Erica mentioned, students are correctly articulating the phonemes, right? Now, my favorite term for how I've been understanding this is we do that phonemic awareness work alongside our phonics work. So in our lesson plan, we have the hear it component for phonemic awareness, and we follow that up in that same lesson with our phonics components. So they're done together, right? And we're helping students make that connection. Then in the phonics work, that's when they practice decoding, reading, spelling, right? So I wanted to make that clear of how we do both those components alongside. And one other example that a lot of my kindergarten teachers do and find success with for their students is they may do a picture sort where the children are thinking about initial sounds, maybe 2 target sounds, sorting pictures by those initial sounds. So they're really paying attention to the sounds first, then to review and make that connection to the grapheme. We could bring in the phonics where we label those piles with the letter that spells that initial sound. Hopefully you can picture what I'm describing, but that's another just quick on the ground example of how we do phonemic awareness skills alongside phonics. When you have both together, you get the biggest bang for your buck, but it doesn't necessarily mean you always have phonics letters present. Hopefully that adds some clarity.
Great. So for the last about 10 minutes of our session, we want to just walk you through our handouts and share our resources. And also the staff of the clinic will put our contact information in the chat because we're always happy to chat. Really what the clinic is a research institution full of lots of people very interested in research about reading and translating it to practice. So we're always happy to engage, and my team knows I'm always happy to start a new research cycle about something new. So anything you're interested in researching, we're happy to find something for you. So what I'm going to do now is first say thank you. If we could all give a round of applause, whether it's a Zoom emoji or whatever it is, to our teachers who took time out of their busy day. Maybe this is their planning, their recess. Thank you so much, Ms. Galligan, Ms. Hardy, and Ms. Scarlett. They really are the superstars today. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now I'm going to share our handouts and then we'll share our contact information. So I wanted to take a moment to share with you what we've given you as a handout today. Thumbs up if you can see my screen. It should be a PDF. Great. Thanks, everyone. So the first part of the handout, which should be available in the app, which I cannot pronounce, is the cover page from the IES recommendations. And then you can see here, there's a link to where you can get more information from those recommendations. We are extremely diligent at the clinic of staying up on research and what evidence-based practices are. And so this is kind of the most recent iteration of our needs-based small group guidance. And so that might help you. You can download a PDF guide there. We also use for training, we use some of the videos embedded in this guide. And we've also created a lot of our own guidance, but this is really the inspiration. Then here, I need to give credit to Heidi Ann Mesmer and her editor, Nell Duke, on the First Words Weekly lesson template. This is what inspires our needs-based small group. So Ms. Hardy, Ms. Galligan, Ms. Scarlett, they're using something that looks like this. We edited it down so it's easier for teachers to use, but it looks approximately like this. And the intellectual property is Heidi Ann Mesmer's. There are similar models from Louisa Moats and the Reading League. But this is what we based ours on. And you can see she has just a weekly plan here. The citation for the book is at the top. And we do own that book at the clinic, obviously, and do recommend it for people interested in getting started with needs-based small groups. So we hope that those resources are helpful for you. And besides that, we are all wrapped up for today. I'm going to put right now our website in the chat. Our website is actually parent and family facing. So it's really more about the citywide clinic. It doesn't have information on our in-schools program, but it is a place where you can learn more information and get in touch with us. And I'll have Abigail and Jackie put their emails in the chat in case you have any questions for them. And my email is on the handout. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We all know we're all here for the same thing, and that is happy, confident readers in kindergarten, first and second grade. So thank you for taking time on this afternoon to ensure that for our kiddos. Thanks everyone.